I'm Rena Striegel. Welcome to Ag Inspo, the podcast that focuses on innovation and creativity in agriculture. In my travels across the U.S., my mind is blown by the farmers, ranchers, and business owners who are contributing to the richness of the agricultural landscape. My hope is that by sharing their stories, you will be inspired to have the courage to break through and bring an idea you have to life. Hi, everybody. We're so excited to have you join us today for our first episode of season 2 of Ag Inspo. We're so thrilled that you're back to join us, and thank you for your support over the past year. And I'm really excited about who we're going to be interviewing today. His name is Dusty Baker. He is the owner-operator of Cross Timbers Bison in Oklahoma. And I'm excited for you to learn a little bit more about him and about his amazing herd of bison. He is a Facebook and YouTube sensation. I'm going to call him that because I am a huge fan of him and what he is doing. So without further ado, let's bring on Dusty and learn a little bit more about raising bison in Oklahoma. Dusty, it's so great to have you on the podcast today. I have to tell you, I have been looking forward to this since we got this set up. For those folks that don't know, Dusty is the owner-operator of Cross Timber Bison in Oklahoma and is a very active YouTube, Facebook guy and has made some amazing videos that I just love. His bison are some of my favorite characters in social media. So, Dusty, before I go on like a crazy fan that's kind of geeking out that I get to talk to you today, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your family and, just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited this is my first podcast actually.
Ooh, so that's awesome.
And, so thanks for having me. It's a special occasion. But so I grew up in a small town and big family, and I grew up in the farm scene and the outdoors, and actually raised sheep and showed sheep through FFA and all that. Played sports in the small town of Sulphur, and there's a park here, and it's a national park. It's Chickasaw National Recreation Area, and they've got these bison here, and I was always mesmerized by them. Just drive by, and you hope to see them in a certain spot of the park, and so that was kind of my the thing that was always around was these bison in the back of my head. Anyways, I grew up, went to Oklahoma State, graduated in 2008, became a teacher. I actually graduated with a wildlife ecology degree. So I had a background in this sort of environment and whatnot with my experience, and then in college. And then taught for a while, and then I moved back to Oklahoma, and I eventually got married to my wife Marissa, and we had talked about doing this bison thing, and I just kept driving by there and seeing them, and it just really inspired me to just kind of jump on board. And I had some experience with them. Let me back up just a little bit. Before I graduated from Oklahoma State, I actually worked in that park where I saw them. I worked for 4 summers. I would go to Oklahoma State in the fall and the spring. I'd come home in the summer, and I actually lived back at home, and I would work in the park. And one of my responsibilities was to take care of the bison. And so that was kind of my, I got to see them, but actually be out there with them. And I can tell you stories about them and whatnot. And, but anyways, so I was teaching, and my wife and I decided to I was like, what do you think about raising them? My mom and them had this farm and didn't do anything with it, and just watch deer basically. And so I said, well, let's see what they say. And so we did. We jumped in, and I called a producer. It's a guy I always talk about, Doc Parsons out of Stratford, Oklahoma, a big, well-known bison producer. And I called him up, and I said, what do you got? And he said, I told him I was interested in raising bison. And he said, well, I've got 5 here ready. And I was like, what? ready to go? And he's like, yeah. And I said, crap, So we drove down there and we looked at them, and about a month later or so we went and picked 5 bison up. So but anyways, I can get carried away on this stuff real quick, but anyways, so that's kind of how we got started. But as far as my family goes, my mom and Kevin, they live here on the property. My stepdad, Kevin, he helps out with the bison. And then we last February, we had Brooks. We had our first child, our baby girl. And then in March, we went on spring break, basically. And I never went back into the classroom just to pick my stuff up. That was it. And so I resigned as a teacher. And my wife currently still works. And one of the reasons we did that is I could stay at home with Brooks. I could take care of the bison and then run our cabin business as well. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is I'm a stay-at-home dad, cabin boy, bison guy, however you want to call it.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So, the thing that I'm always really interested in when I get to talk to people who sort of, pursue a passion and take a leap of faith and have to figure out how to turn it into a business is, the early days. So, you obviously got some instant, reinforcement that you should raise bison by having, one of your mentors say, come pick up some because I've got them ready to go. So you go get your first 5. So, your bison are somewhat famous in that they all have names and they are, frequent characters in your video series. But, tell me about those first 5 and bringing them home. And, what was that like the first few months of raising domesticated bison as opposed to wild bison?
Yeah, you can, some people like to call them that, some people don't. I mean, they're wild in their blood. We all know that what these animals are kind of like. But the guy I bought them from, he's basically a bison legend. He's been around forever, but he spent a lot of time with them. He kind of trained them to kind of get used to people, so that when we took them over, they weren't wild and crazy and weren't going to bounce off the pins and run through our fences. So that was a good start for us. And when we brought them home, I don't know. I mean, it was just crazy nervous and a lot of anxiety and excitement at the same time to let these animals go. Are they going to go crazy? Are they going to, run through your fence, like I just said? And we put them in a corral system that Kevin and I put together. And we kept them there for, I don't know, a month or so. We started feeding them. We obviously watered them and just made them feel at home, gave them a new environment, let them get used to it. And I don't know, they were yearlings then. And so I still have those first 5, except for one, Lucy. We lost Lucy later that year because we loaded them up in a trailer. I didn't have a handling facility yet. And we took her and all of them to Doc up in Stratford, about 35 minutes away. And he has a really nice system. And we went to vaccinate them and vaccinated them all and got their worming and all that. And then on the way back home, we went to unload them, and she was down in the trailer. And this was in my first year. This is 2018 or 2019. Anyways, this is my first year of having bison, and she's dead, and she had been gored. And so that was a kind of a lesson learned. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, okay, it's time to invest in a handling system. So we did that. But that's a long story. But to talk about my original herd there, I got 4 of them here. And of course, Dunbar, my goofy bull, he's 3 years old. I've got Eleanor, my sweetie. She's kind of a strange bison. She just comes up to you in the middle of the pasture. She's really sweet. And then I've got Peaches and then Belle Star. And so I'll have them here. And they actually had their first babies last year. And so that's exciting. Yeah, that was to actually see that, all that time and energy and effort going into something, and your first original 5 have babies. So Dunbar did his job. So
Oh, that's awesome. I think that's
yeah,
amazing how many kind of big lessons you learned in a very
yeah,
short amount of time, you know, in
very,
terms of what it was going to take to raise animals like bison.
yeah, yeah. Every time, I mean, you learn so much from these animals, and I'll go to NBA conferences, which stands for the National Bison Association, and even guys that have been doing it for 30 years are always constantly learning about these animals. And so I have so much more to learn, but in the short 3 years of having them, you are forced to learn very quickly. They teach you a lot about them, and you really just have to pay attention to them, and I don't know, it's part of the journey is learning from them, and you try to improve as you grow. So yeah,
Mhm.
you definitely learn quickly.
So, you know, you got your all your characters, and Dunbar was the first guy in the herd,
Yep.
and then later Big Joe came along.
Yep.
And Big Joe, you know, just from watching your videos, seems like he is a master teacher in that he challenges every plan you think you've got. He helps
Yes.
you improve upon the plan.
Yes. He is he's our first big challenge. When I say big, that's literally he is a big bison. He's probably I like to say 2,000, but I'm going to give him a little benefit. I think he's 18 to 2,000 pounds, 1,800, 2,000 pounds, somewhere in that range. So we had a really good opportunity. This guy called me up from Enid, Oklahoma, and he was basically getting rid of his herd, and he only had 3 left, and he had Big Joe and these 2 cows. And I really wasn't interested in another bull, but he said, "You're gonna want it." He said, "You're gonna want it. You're gonna want it." And I said, uh, "I don't need another bull. You know, I've got Dunbar." And I went up there and saw him, and I was like, "Okay, I want him." And I mean, he's beautiful. And so we had a good opportunity there, and I took advantage of it, and we brought him home, and he had kind of seen my videos and how I handle them, and I think he just trusted me and wanted him to be in good hands. And so but so the problem with Big Joe is he's never been through a squeeze shoot. He's such a big guy. He's almost 7, does exactly what he wants, and you just don't get in his way. Because I mean, when we had him in the what we call our tub area, kind of the U shape part of our system, he just stopped and he said, "I'm not going any further." And you know, we would try to poke him and get him to move, and he would not move. That 2,000 pounds said, "I'm not doing it, and you're not going to make me." And so he broke through a gate, and that was the last time we tried that. And so yes, he has tested us for sure. And but the cows went through, and no problem, and they've never been through a squeeze shoot. But he is just set in his ways, and he's just so big that you don't want to push that animal too far, because he is nice and he is calm. But when you get him in there, it can get really sticky. And, you know, when I look over at my wife and she's giving me that look like, "You better quit, it's time to stop," then it's time to stop. And so, yeah, you have to remind yourself of how dangerous these animals can be. And it's not worth it at the end of the day. So
So you're now in what, year 3?
yes,
Your
I
third year?
started, I started, we got our herd, I think May 2018. So this will be 3 years. Yes, ma'am.
So now that you've got a couple of seasons under your belt, you've got, you know, you definitely make a lot of improvements as you go along. It's always fascinating where you'll post something where something doesn't go well, and then the next
Yeah.
video, you've got the solution to the problem. And
Yeah.
it takes a couple of maybe with, well, every time Big Joe gets involved, it usually seems like it takes at least 2 videos to solve the problem, because
Yes,
he
it
tests you a
does.
little bit.
Yep.
But you know, what is your hopes and desires for your operation? What do you and Marissa hope you'll be able to do with this herd?
Well, I get that question a lot. Like, what people ask, what are you doing with them? What do you have them for? You know, and I always tell people they're just like cattle as far as the industry. But we we have what I call conservation herd or your foundation herd, which is basically all the adults I have here, which includes my first 5 and then Joe and the 2 ladies. So what we're doing is building off of that and with a cow calf herd, and we're just trying to grow the herd is what we want to do. It takes bison longer than cattle to reproduce up to where you can, have your production or your calves, which become heifers, reproduced. And then if you get into the meat side of it, it takes almost 2 years if you want to slaughter an animal to get to that prime weight and that prime age to slaughter them for meat. So we're just like in the kind of the very beginning of this process. And so our goal is to, one, we want to expand on land. We want to have more land for the bison, of course. We're kind of at the property I'm at right now. We're kind of at the peak. We're getting close to where we're going to be full. So with that said, we're trying to buy land so that we can grow the herd more. It just all depends on the land, what we can get into as far as numbers. But I would love to, have 40, 50 animals out there. And, a producer told me once, you don't have to have hundreds of animals or hundreds of bison to make a profit off of this, a reasonable profit. What you said was you got to have good animals. And that was one of the things when we started out on this is, since I had the foundation herd, my first 5, we've invested in some others. We bought from the Quapaw Nation in Oklahoma, or northeastern Oklahoma, and they've got good lineage, good genetics. And so we started off with the good animals, and we build off of that into, hopefully one day we'll have numerous of those so that we can create a really good breeding program to keep the genetics in these awesome animals and grow the herd more. And then eventually what we want to do is get into the meat side of it, of things, and try to promote this awesome, healthy animal, and the healthy meat that it provides to so many people. So that's kind of where we want to be, is we want to be on the meat side. We want to grow the herd and we want to have more numbers. So
Talk to me just a little bit about the genetics of bison, because, most people, when they think of bison, they think, big herds running the range, free to do what they want. How long has the industry of bison husbandry been around, and what is the process of genetics for something that is technically a wild animal?
Well, as far as raising bison, I think it was like I've talked to some guys in the 90s is when they were into it, some in the 80s, but I want to say 90s is the target time frame where people started buying bison and it was going really good. And I think they were just trying to figure it out. It was almost, bison were considered like almost an exotic animal for so long. And it's just now where these animals are not considered an exotic animal. People were like, oh, they're wild and crazy and whatnot. And if you got to have a high fence to put them in and all this and that. I think it was like that is my understanding in the early 90s. And they weren't very popular. They weren't a very popular meat. And then I want to say in the early 2000s, it crashed. The bison market crashed really heavy. And then it rebuilt itself. And since it rebuilt itself in the early 2000s, people started to notice this animal more. The restaurants started to notice this animal more and started to invest in the market side of it. And so I think it's just slowly grown. and it's gotten so big now. We're almost at 600,000 bison in North America. And that has grown a bunch since the early 2000s. And I think a lot of people are realizing the healthy side of this animal. And the media, social media has definitely helped that, promoting the bison. The National Bison Association has grown with members and promoting this healthy meat. And I think more and more people see that. The restaurants see it. And people are realizing it. And so with that, herds grow. And that's kind of where it's at. Now, as time has gone on, I think genetics have became more and more important because, back in that time frame, that 90s and early 2000s, people were still breeding them to cattle and what we call the beefalo. And so, which is highly, highly discouraged, because when you get down to that sort of, I don't know if you call it a bottleneck or whatever, but when you get down to lower populations of bison, you start to lose those genetics, especially whenever you're breeding them with cattle, bovine. So I think people are realizing it more and more, and they're holding on to whatever the bison have today, whatever purest of genetics that the bison have from, the 1800s. We try to hold on to that as much as possible, and we try to grow that. And so, Yellowstone, Wind Cave, the Wichita Mountains in Oklahoma, Custer State Park, a lot of those, and there's many more, hold on to those genetics that have been with them for hundreds of years. And I gravitate towards that, and we try to build off of that. I mean, I've got a Teddy Roosevelt cow here. Her lineage, I got her from the Quapaw Nation. And one reason that I like reaching out to the nations, it's a little harder to get animals from there because of the Intertribal Council and whatnot, but they have some of the best genetics because they trade within each other, they swap within each other, and they get a lot of their bison from Yellowstone. They get a lot of their bison. I know now Yellowstone's a heck of a process to get bison. It's an extreme process with brucellosis testing and all that. But they get some of their bison from all these natural parks. And that's where a lot of the good genetics are. And so I've been lucky and fortunate to get some from a tribe here in Oklahoma, and their lineage happens to come from Teddy Roosevelt. So I've got a Teddy Roosevelt linkage here. My point is all those parks go back to the early 1900s, whenever people were like, oh crap, we're about to lose this animal. And they started going out and actually catching them and bringing them in. And, which is what Teddy Roosevelt actually, he put his hand in that and helping, try to restore the population of the declining bison in the late 1800s. So we just try to hold on to that genetically and keep the bison as much as they were in the 1800s, when they were thriving, when 30 to 60 million of them were roaming around out here. So
yeah. So tell me a little bit about just raising bison. Do you try to, treat them as if they were on the range? Is there special things that you have to do because they don't have the territory that they normally would have? Just talk a little bit about how you raise them.
So we're actually trying to change up some ways we do things. Regenerative ag is becoming a popular thing. And so what we've done here is built some paddocks, and big project. I'm just about to wrap up water systems, because you got to have water systems if you want to rotate them. So you got to think of it a big scale here. Like the bison in the, forever would roam all the way from Mexico to Canada. And so they were like essentially ahead of the parasites and the worms. And a lot of those didn't exist until the cattle were brought here. When cattle were introduced, of course, diseases is what brought down a lot of the bison, because they weren't used to it. But essentially, the bison were roaming on the Great Plains and moving where the grass was, and could roam for thousands of miles. Well, then barbed wire was invented, and you had the fence, basically. And so now they're put on a certain area, and they're limited. They're not able to move with the grass, move with the seasons. And so when you do that, obviously, um, they're going to be in a smaller area. And when you do that, that's where the parasites come in, especially down here in this area of the country. We deal with parasites. And so you have to manage that. Now, what we're going to try to do is rotate them so that they're not in the same area, around their feces and their urine constantly. They're moving. And so that's part of this regenerative ag that we're going to try to get into on a small scale. And because we have them fenced in, they're not on thousands of acres roaming around. We got to bring them in and work them twice a year. And when I say work them, that's just basically handling them and getting them into a squeeze chute and giving them their vaccinations. And so what we do is we give them a wormer, and we typically give them another vaccination just to prevent any sort of diseases or parasites that will attack their system. Because we have fences, everybody has bison in a fence, essentially. You have to manage their health, and if you don't, you'll lose them. Back when they didn't have fences and stuff, it was just natural causes, and predation, wolves, and so on. But today we have to manage that. If you want to raise these animals and you want to keep them healthy, you've got to vaccinate them. So
yeah, tell me a little bit about the properties of meat. You mentioned that they've kind of come back on the scene because of the health of the meat. How does bison meat differ from like a grass-fed beef? And I'm going to just put a big old plug right in here to tell everybody that's listening that I'm a huge bison meat fan. It is my preferred meat, and my freezer is full of it. So
good.
So I'm going to put that little plug in that it's awesome. And if you haven't tried it, you need to try it. So, but talk a little bit about the difference between like a grass-fed beef and a buffalo or a bison meat.
Some of the things is one, it's one of the highest protein meats there is. I think elk is the highest, maybe. But so you have a really high protein meat. It's a lean meat. It's not. I mean, some people do feed them. There's always a grass-fed versus grain-fed, whatever. But it's still it's a lean meat. It's low in cholesterol. It's low in fat. There's less fat in bison than there is in chicken, and I think that's amazing. And what I've learned is there's so many people with health conditions, people with cancer that can only eat this meat and will only eat this meat because of how healthy it is for your body. And so I think that's amazing that people that want to be healthy, or that people that have health conditions, want to eat this meat because it is so clean. It's and it's just healthy meat for you. So I don't, people compare it to cattle all the time, but and then the great thing about it is it's not gamey. It's not a gamey animal. It's just a pure tasting animal. And I don't know how else to explain it. The facts are in it that bison meat it's a healthy meat. And you know what? God created these animals to thrive on this country. And when he made them like that, he made them lean animals. And, the natives, there's a reason the Native Americans were so healthy. There's a reason the Native Americans were in such good shape, and why they thrived and counted on these animals for so long is because of, they were so healthy. And they can survive just about anywhere. So I don't know. I'll get all into it if I talk about Native Americans and stuff like that. So
well, no, I really think it's very, one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you today is because, I love your ability to take the legacy of this animal. And of course, there's one of the other superstars of Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my
But to take the legacy of this animal and weave it into how it is very applicable to today, and why that thread of our history is so important to preserve.
Yes.
And I think that that's a really remarkable piece. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about being a teacher. And I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense about why he likes to educate and teach about what he's doing and why he's doing what he's doing. And I think that's really great. But one thing I have noticed is that your bison are not at all bugged by your dogs, because I think you've got two and they're always right there with you, and your bison don't seem bugged by them a bit.
No, not at all. Not so. My mom and them have the big Pyrenees, and she's around here all the time. The big polar bear. But Maya, they don't bother. She doesn't bother them at all. She tries to act like she's a bison dog, but she's not. She's all talk. She'll go up and snip at them, but when there's just one, when all of the herd's around, she's like, heck no. But yeah, bison and dogs kind of, they don't get along, but mine are pretty chill with her, and they don't even bother them. It's just like another animal, I guess. But anyways.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the highlights and challenges of the last couple of years. What has been the most surprising thing to you, or the sort of greatest success that you've had in the last, 3 years as you've started this operation?
Probably the biggest challenge is really like probably developing a handling system, because every time we work these animals, you're always learning something. Your gait's not high enough, you've got a gap that's too far apart, or it's just like, okay, well, they don't like this, and this works. Those are kind of a lot of the challenges that I would say that we go through as far as working the animals. Another challenge is I lost a calf. I lost my very first heifer calf that we have ever had. I lost her in January, and it was basically because I didn't put a gate. I didn't weld it. I didn't fasten a gate when I built these corral pens closer to the exterior of the corral. So there was a gap there. I don't know, maybe 8 inches or so, maybe not that far, but enough for a heifer, or enough for a calf to get her head in there. She basically put her head in between the gate and got stuck and panicked, and we weren't here in time to catch her. But that's a challenge. I lost one, like I said earlier in the beginning of this, is I lost Lucy, and that was basically from moving them one place to another, just a random event of she got gored. That's probably been the challenges is their health. Mm-hmm. I've had the Teddy Roosevelt cow I was talking about earlier. Her name's Dakota. She got a disease a couple of years ago. It's called anaplasmosis. It's a disease caught by a tick or a horsefly, and she went down hard. She was like a 1,200 pound cow, and she went down to, like, I don't know, maybe 500 or 600 pounds. It was crazy. But I got Doc Parsons involved with that, and got that handled, and she recovered from it. So I'd say probably the health side of things is probably your biggest challenge with these animals. And I don't know. If you ask people on bigger ranches and stuff, they may have bigger challenges, but those are what we deal with here. And I don't know. I kind of like to say I don't think we have a lot of major challenges besides just the health side of things or the handling facility side of things. Losing them is very hard. When you own animals, it doesn't matter if you own a pet or any type of livestock, you're going to lose animals. That's just kind of how it works. But we've had a lot of good things,
Hmm.
happen from it. And you asked me kind of some of the major things that have happened or some good things that have happened. I will say, as far as Facebook and Instagram, some of that, or sorry, YouTube, I will say that kind of the highlight of that was, um, I saw an opportunity. We sat down and we were all excited raising bison, and there just wasn't a lot out there. And so I saw kind of a niche, and my I did have the teaching knowledge and experience, and so I saw an opportunity to film myself once I got over the fact that I had to film myself. And, it's embarrassing to start doing that and then watch yourself. I refuse to watch myself, by the way. My wife will want to watch it, and I will watch it one time and I'm done. I don't like to watch it. So anyways, we found a niche there where there wasn't a lot of bison stuff out there. And so I jumped into that and got started, and it just kind of took off. And my whole point of this conversation is, it's the support from people. There's so many people that have been so supportive and positive about me, not only just doing these videos, but just showing them bison. Like,
Hmm.
people are like, I've never seen a bison before up that close, or I've never seen this before, and they don't know much about them, but they just love seeing them. They love seeing my story and us raising them. And so I think, like, that's probably been one of the biggest benefits. It's of course looking out there and seeing your first calf. Like, that's awesome. That's so exciting. And seeing the herd grow from all your hard work. But it's really kind of gratifying to hear the support, and see it from so many people, and how it's grown. And and I'm one of the only few that do it. And so at the same time it grows, I get to help other bison producers, and I get to encourage people to join the National Bison Association, and hopefully influence people in a positive way, because um, these animals are special animals, and they're just unique, and they're one of a kind. And I get to raise an animal that almost disappeared, and because of our failures in the past. And so it's just really cool to be able to raise them, and I get to share that with people.
Yeah. A lot of people try to break into social media marketing. They want to do videos and get a lot of people following them. When you started doing that, did you have a plan or a strategy, or did you just think, I'm going to put videos out there and just see what happens?
Yeah, that's basically it. I'm just like, here we go, let's just try it. And of course, my first ones, I go back and I watch them, and they're just terrible. Of course, just embarrassing. And in my mind. But no, I saw that, and I the I just saw a teaching opportunity, and I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? Yeah, I can come out here and film them grazing, and and hanging out and doing their thing. I can do that, and people probably would love that. But me being a teacher, it just kind of naturally came out. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, okay, I'm out here raising bison. I think I was in year two when I started YouTube, about a year and a half or something into it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach what I know about these animals and what I'm learning from these animals out here. But, like, what are all these guys that have been raising them for 30 or 40 years thinking of me right now? I'm thinking that in the back of my head. What are these guys thinking? This this goofy young guy here raising these, out here rolling around in the field with these bison, or what's this guy doing? And so I just saw a teaching opportunity, and then I saw it grow, and how people just loved learning about them, and seeing them. So I kind of combined it all together, and I said, okay, well, I can teach and about these animals and what I know, what I've learned, what I've studied, and actually grow a story. And I think people like the story side of it is because we're always trying to improve this property. And this was an old dairy farm that we converted into a bison ranching facility and or system. And so I think people like watching the story. And at the same time, I can teach them what I'm learning. I can show them what I'm doing and how I'm growing as a young producer. And it's fun. It's fun. And it's especially fun when there's so many people behind you and they're saying more videos, more videos, you know, and yeah, so.
Yeah, I wondered if you had a converted property, because I noticed in some of your videos you've got two harvestors that
Yeah.
stand, and I was like, I got to ask you about the harvestors. What was this before it raised bison? So it was
Yeah.
very, very
Yeah,
cool.
it was an old dairy farm. Yeah. And those are actually, they're in really good shape. We've cleaned one of them out, but anyways, yeah, they're pretty neat. They definitely stick out in my videos. Everybody knows where I'm at when you can see the navy blue silos in the background. So yeah, it was an old dairy farm, and we just took a lot of the existing stuff. We got rid of a bunch of stuff and cleaned it up, but we took a lot of the existing and moved and grew from there. So and built on top of it.
That's awesome. So I have to ask you just a little bit about the intelligence of a bison, because, when you're every once in a while, when you're working Big Joe, he's not really upset. He's just kind of checking it all out. And then pretty soon he just goes and does what he's going to do, and gates go flying, and that's the end of it. He just kind of walks out. So tell me a little bit about just their intelligence, what they're like as an animal to work with. Just tell me a little bit about them.
I will say that they are very smart animals, and you definitely have to train them. When we have a system, and they know, like I'm in the Polaris Ranger right now, and they know that when I drive out in the pasture, I typically have cubes. And so we've learned how to get them on our good side, is what I like to say. And they know, like, you've done this several times, they understand. And then when it comes to working them, you've got to get them in there. So we start a feeding program, and we'll move our troughs around, and we'll feed them in a certain area, and they'll come in there, and then we eventually catch them basically in a holding area. And they know when that gate shuts, and they can tell by my behavior what's going on. And they're so used to it now that when we actually do work them, the last time it went really smooth, because they've been through the system. They've been through our handling facility. They've been through the squeeze chute, minus Big Joe. He's an exception. But it's getting them to run through the alley, run through the squeeze chute, get their vaccinations, and they got to stop here, wait, and then we kick them back out. So it's repetition, and it's being consistent, and then changing stuff whenever you need to make it safer for them and for us, for the people helping me. But I'll just say that these Dunbar knows how to take a gate off a hinge. He's figured that out. We've had to go and flip all of our hinges down. And that's our fault. I'll take the blame for that. But they're smart and they're witty, especially some of my cows. But you always got to watch them, and I've trust them. I've built a trust for them over time. But I don't know. I would say that they're a pretty smart animal, and they figure things out very quickly. But you can also get them in a routine where they feel more comfortable, and I feel more comfortable. And a lot of that is through feed. So I don't know if that answers your question on really how smart they are. But Big Joe, for example, that guy is just older than any animal out here. And he's been down this road, I guess. And he just knows that he just doesn't want to do something. He's just not going to do it. And when you're messing with an animal that big, it's just like, okay, you're the boss at this point. And so I'm going to leave you alone.
So effectively you run 2 herds on your property. And
yes,
just for some general knowledge for our listeners, like, when you're raising cattle, you're either how many cows can you put on an acre, or if you're in a less productive land, it's how many acres do you need to raise a cow. So how do you balance your land to animal ratio, and like how do you think about that? Because obviously your pastures are already greening up. I can see that behind you. Your fields are looking like their spring is sprung in Oklahoma.
It's getting there. Yep. It's getting there. So what we do is, as far as the land goes, the number for acreage, and I get this question a lot, so thank you for asking me, is right now, I think in this area of Oklahoma, we've got about 4 or 5 acres of bison per head. And like I said, we've got room for a little bit more, but I think what we're about to do as far as this rotational stuff, we'll be able to have more bison, because we're going to try to keep them moving just like they did back in the day. So once we do that, I think we'll be able to have more bison in less acres, and more of that maybe intensive grazing for a short amount of period. And then we move them to another paddock, and then we get that intensive grazing for so many days and can keep them rotating. That's the idea. Now, when I got Big Joe, that screwed everything up because I wanted to take one herd and move them in these paddocks. And then I got him, and I'm like, ugh. We've figured out that you can't have Big Joe and Dunbar in the same area. Obviously, Big Joe likes to show his masculinity in front of Dunbar. And I've had him nose to nose some, and I've put that on my videos. And it's turned into a situation where they're both getting a little more feistier every time, and they've started lifting up the fences. They started lifting up T-posts out of the ground, actually. Dunbar did. And so I may have to bring in some hot wire just for a little bit of extra protection. But we're managing right now with 2 herds. That's the problem that I'm in right now, is 2 herds, because you've got to keep these bulls away from each other. And as long as they're not touching nose to nose, I think we'll be okay. But I may have to actually bring in a couple of strands of hot wire to just so I don't have some fence torn up or any of that. So, but, to quickly answer your question, I'd say 4 to 5 acres ahead. People always ask me that, but one thing I always tell them is it depends on where you are. Obviously, what part of the country are you in, and what part of the state, what part of your state are you in? Because contact your NRCS office, which is your National Resource Conservation Service, which is part of the USDA. Contact those people. They will actually come out and they will survey your land. They'll look at your grasses, and they will give you a stocking rate, is what the term we like to use is a stocking rate on how many animals you can have on your property. And typically you can have bison is pretty close to cattle. The ratio is. So I would definitely contact the local NRCS office and have them come out and look at your land. And it's free. That's the great part about it, is it doesn't cost anything. They're there for you to help you.
You talked earlier in the podcast about the regenerative ag, and how you're incorporating that into your rotation program. Did you find that when you had the professionals come out, that you needed to do anything different with the grasses that were growing, since it was a dairy at one time and now you're raising bison? Have you had to add any new genetics to your plants to support your animals?
We haven't here. Where we are located in southern Oklahoma, we get good rainfall and we have good cover, ground cover. So we haven't had to change anything necessarily because of what's here. We do have native, and we do have Bermuda. Bermuda is not my favorite at all. It's not the bison's favorite. They'll eat it if it's super low, but if it Bermuda, just like in a yard, can grow really fast, and once it gets to a certain height, they're like, no. So with the paddock system that we've created, we're going to try to force them to eat typically grasses that they'll go somewhere else and eat the native. Like they want this good stuff over here, and they'll nip on it, and then they'll leave the Bermuda, and then the Bermuda grows. Now, there's nothing wrong with Bermuda. It's good protein. It's just not their favorite. It's great hay. But with the paddock system, it's going to force them to eat these grasses that they typically wouldn't favor. But as far as this property, we haven't had to do that. Some people plant, triticale or winter wheat. We don't do that. I really don't have the material for that. To do that, all the machinery to do that. But we give out hay in the winter, so we don't have to plant winter wheat and all of that. But yeah, no, we're lucky here to just have a lot of native grass for the bison. And because we're starting this paddock system, we can kind of protect some of this ground. Like they've been hitting it hard, we can move them to another area and let them attack that. Let this one recover, give it a recovery period, and then rotate them around, and they'll eventually come back to it. And now they've got fresh grass, and give them some time to attack this pod or this pod here. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's amazing how similar they are to other grazing animals, and yet they're so incredibly different too.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I'm going to say there is no one that is listening to this that is not going to want to go check out what you're doing. So just drop your handles really quick. Where can they find you? How can they connect with you? And after you do that, I want you to tell me a little bit about your cabins. Like we didn't even talk about the cabins. So give me your cross timber bison, YouTube, Instagram, whatever you want to drop. We'll put it in the show notes. And then let's talk for a few minutes about your cabins.
Okay. So you can, Facebook and YouTube are my biggest platforms. Both is Cross Timbers Bison. And I post the video at least once a week on those. Right now I do Sundays at 1:00 on YouTube. And then on Facebook, I post a video at about 4:00 in the evening on there. And then I'll also post a lot of pictures and stuff on Facebook and Instagram. That's where I kind of keep people updated on what's going on. Also have a membership on Facebook. You can follow and be a member of the herd. And you can, I think it's $5 a month. It's a monthly fee, and you get discounts for merchandise. And then I'll also will actually send people, they kind of get a behind the scenes information. I'll send them messages, let them know what I'm doing, or I'll post a picture just to those members. And they kind of get some of that exclusive stuff that, a lot of my big subscribers won't see. And then we have some merchandise, and it's out on crosstimbersbison.com. And you can actually click on links on there to get into my YouTube videos. You can see some pictures I've posted. And then you can buy the merchandise obviously on there. So we're always coming up with new merchandise and working on that right now. So, and then let me think, my wife and I will say are in the works of getting into the meat side of things. And my goal is to eventually have bison jerky. And I don't want to get into too much detail about that because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of planning. And so we're kind of getting into the first phases of that. But so hopefully in the future, we will have that available for our followers as well. And as far as the cabins, wife and I bought 10 rental cabins 2 years ago. And it was just something we wanted to do, something different. and we saw an opportunity, and we wanted to invest in something else, and dabble in it, a business. And because the bison, we just a small herd here, and it takes time for them to grow. And so we saw this opportunity, and we like making people happy. And I love what my hometown creates, or what my hometown has. It's a very big tourist town in Sulphur. We have the national park, we have the lake, we have the Chickasaw Nation is here, which is, they have casinos here and whatnot. We have a wonderful park that has natural springs and a creek, and so much to do here in this area. You've got Turner Falls State Park down the road. And so what we saw is this opportunity to have these cabins so people could come here. And so we bought 10 rental cabins, and I've been working my tail off on those for the past year, updating them, and just spent a lot of time with them. And so you can check that out. It's called Rocky Point Cabins, is the name of the property, and it's on our website, rockypointcabins.com. And you can book and check out our cabins from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So how close are the cabins to your property? Are you doing some agritourism yet?
Not yet. We would love that. We would absolutely love that. But the cabins are about 20 miles away, 20 minutes away from the bison. So the bison are on the east side of town. The cabins are on the west side of town. We're actually a 3-minute drive from the Lake Arbuckle. So our cabins are really close to the lake.
Nice.
So we get a good balance of being in the woods, living in, we actually live on the property, and then, get to spend some time with the bison as well on the ranch. So it's a good balance.
Nice. Nice. Well, it sounds like you guys have got a ton of really cool things going and coming, and it's going to be fun to follow all of that. And, honestly, I just can't thank you enough for taking the time to, come on and share what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about your herd and, the cabins, and, it's just going to be fun to see where you go from here, because when I found you on Facebook, honestly, every time I see one of them, I'm like, oh, what's going on today? Like, I got, the way that you just like make it like you're right there and part of the action, you just do a great job. And it's really fun to follow everything and see all the goings on out there.
Yeah, there's always something. There's always something. These guys they're full of character, and they're out here laying down right now. It's just fun to be around. I'm gonna drive over there real quick, a little closer, so you can come on, Maya. So you can actually see them in their natural setting.
Yeah, it looks like a beautiful day there today. The clouds are gorgeous.
Had a bunch of rain, and so they're just hanging out. They're just chilling over here.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
it's really amazing how big they are, even from a distance. Like,
I know. Last night I did a live feed with Big Joe, and my wife said he looks huge. It's currently clear and 57 degrees. Oh, thank you, Siri. She was like, yeah, he looks huge, but the camera doesn't always, get how big these animals are, but that's, like you said earlier, is getting up close to them. And that's kind of something I can do here. At a lot of places you can't get this close to them. And so I just try to bring people in as close as I can to getting to them. So, but yeah.
We talked a little bit about how big Big Joe is. What is the size of, like one of your, more mature cows? What would her size and weight be?
So I've got one that's about 1,100 pounds, and that's a good sized cow. She's laying down right over there. Yeah, I'd say 1,100 pounds is probably the biggest. And then I've got some 900s and then probably around 1,000. So, and that's in their fullest time, you know, when they're hitting the grass really hard and stuff like that. So, and there's a goofball over there. He's on the other side of the fence. So,
so when do you try to calve? Do you calve, do bison calve in the fall or in the spring, or when is the optimal time for them?
so typically it's the spring. Sometimes occasionally people will have bison in the fall, but it's kind of rare. We the earliest I've ever had is a May baby. I think we had one in late May last year, but mine are, I would say my month is June. Anywhere from now, actually, the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve, they've had their first baby, and April, May, and June, and I even had some up in July, which I don't like July because it gets hot down here and it can be hard on them. But yeah, so it's in about a month it'll be hot and heavy with the red dogs. I don't know if we'll have any here in April, but for sure May we'll have some.
Awesome. Well, we will look forward to seeing that. That will be very exciting. That'll be very exciting.
I have a chance to have 6. We'll see.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
She's rolling around.
Yeah. Getting some of that winter fur itched.
Yeah. Yeah, she's already starting to molt. So you can tell she's a little scraggly right now, but yeah, pretty soon they'll be shedding all this hair off. And yeah, this is Peaches right here. She's one of my other friendly bison, and I don't know, I'm probably 15 feet from her. My wife would probably yell at me if she
probably will as soon as she sees this, and you're gonna get it after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Well, I have to say, I wish I was standing there with you.
I know. It's I don't know. I'm pretty lucky. I'm probably a little crazy and stupid sometimes to be out here this close with some bison, with just standing out here. But she's getting agitated. She's mad at me now. But no, I'm pretty lucky. We do spend so much time with them that they're used to people, and so me standing out here is not crazy for them, because if you go out into a lot of places, you wouldn't have got out of the ATV because they'd have just ran off, so.
Have you ever had any close calls with them where they did not like what you were doing, or got too close to them or a baby, and you kind of had a close call with them?
Yeah, they definitely change their attitudes when they've got a baby. Obviously, just like any mama would do. But yeah, I've got a feisty one. She's laying over there. It's my biggest one. She's got some attitude. She'll run us out of the corral. She's ran me and Kevin out of the corral a couple times, and and she's actually had a calf. So yeah, I've ran into Eleanor once. Whenever they got out, we had to catch them, and Eleanor and I kind of, it was one of those situations where I was trying to get out and she was trying to get out of the way, and we just kind of ran into each other. But luckily Eleanor is a smaller bison and so nobody got hurt or nothing. But
yeah,
so anyways, yeah, you definitely have to be careful when the red dog season is out, because the mamas are trying to protect them, which is awesome. That's what we want them to do.
Absolutely. Well, Dusty, this has been fabulous. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to just, talk to us a little bit, educate us about the herd, bring us up to speed with what's going on so that we can follow you and support you. Because it's no doubt that there's some good things coming, because now I'm going to be on high alert for bison jerky.
Yes. Well, that's I hope I can get you some. So
You let me know, let me know if you need some hands. I'll come down and help you. We'll get that product to market.
All right. That sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, you have a good day, and we will definitely get everybody connected to you so everybody can keep an eye on what's going down there in Oklahoma, and just keep the great videos coming. They are awesome.
I will. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this and for chatting with me.
You bet. This is Rena Striegel, and you have been listening to Ag Inspo, the podcast. Please visit my website at tomorrowiscoming.com and find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you haven't yet, please go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another inspirational episode where you will hear from another amazing entrepreneur who has had the courage to break through and bring an idea to life.